Welcome back, folks, to the Director's Garage. A little holiday magic for you. I'm your host and resident idiot, Michael, and today, folks, we're getting back into reviews. Finally, I know, magical, right?
Get out!
Well, today we're going to be doing a deep dive into this monster amp right here, the Enleum AMP-23r with its rattly feet, 25 watts into 8 ohm, my goodness, headphone absurdity. This thing has enough power to light up a small suburb, folks, which is to say it can drive any of the most demanding headphones on the planet, namely the HiFiman Sesfara and the Modhouse Tungsten we checked out last week, with power to spare. Now, before we get too far, I haven't talked much about this on the channel, but I did start a Patreon subscription. I know, I joined the dark side, but what I did is I put a bunch of tiers out there, but it's really all about the $5 tier because that unlocks a Patreon Zoom meetup. It's kind of like my weekly live stream, but with way more interaction because we'll all have cameras and the ability to talk to each other. We can show off our latest obsessions, talk about pretty much anything, ask any questions, get answers. So check that out. There's a link down in the description below this video. It's kind of a beta right now. I'm seeing how this goes, but the first live stream Zoom will be December 23rd at 9:30 a.m. Pacific. I hope you can join us. I'm excited to see if we can grow this community further and increase our interaction with each other, because that's what it's all about. I plan on doing like 1 or 2 of these a month at least, depending on demand, and the $5 helps pay for that Zoom subscription. Okay, back to the Enleum. Now, what impressed me in that initial first listen is that the amp showed me something in the Sesfara that I hadn't before heard, and it offered a clear delineation between the Sesfara and the ZMF Caldera, where before the difference between those two headphones was a lot closer. Now, with the Enleum, this thing's heavy, there was a snappiness and a punch on the Sesfara where there wasn't when I paired it with the original Bakoon 13R, which is this amp's predecessor. And today we're going to talk about what I found when I put these two solid-state amps head-to-head. If you've ever wondered if there's really a difference between the Enleum AMP-23r and the Bakoon 13R, today we're going to get some answers. I'm going to talk about what's under the hood of this amp that sets it apart, and I'll also give you my early thoughts on the Enleum and the Zale HM1, that $8,000 amp that is currently rocking my world, God help me. And I'm going to talk about the flagship headphone that least impressed me when I paired it with this amp. Now, the Enleum comes to us from our friends at Audio 46. I know. Now, first off, I got to thank Audio 46. I've had this amp for at least a month, and they haven't so much as questioned where the hell it is. And that's because at Audio 46, you're going to find genuine enthusiasts just like us. Real people with a passion for hooking you up with the best gear. Like the Moondrop Beautiful World, a gorgeous flagship IEM that won't break the bank, or the new SP1000 from Astell&Kern, finished in 24 karat gold. Oh my God, it's beautiful. And the new Clark Audio E3, that's a closeback that's been getting rave reviews. You can find it all at audio46.com, and here is the best part. If you use the coupon code Director's Garage, all one word, at checkout, you can knock an extra 5% off most of the gear they carry and give a little bit back to the Director's Garage in the process. It's a win-win. They ship fast and free. God, these guys are simply the best in the business. So the Enleum AMP-23r, I've become attached to this amp. Now, when this amp first hit the market, there was an initial surge of enthusiasm for the 23. It drew raves across the board. Then, a few months later, the tides began to turn. The newness of the 23R started waning, and some folks weren't as happy with its performance. Well, I have a few theories that I'll float throughout this video, but let's first take a look at this unit's quirks. This thing is ridiculously cool, but there are a few things that kind of left me scratching my head. Let's kick this review off with ergonomics, and there's some terrific and some not so terrific stuff going on here. Aesthetically, this thing's a beauty. Look at these gorgeous scalloped sides and the scalloped attenuator that moves oh so smoothly. You don't feel clicks as you rotate, but you do hear the clicking. Lots and lots of clicking, both in your headphone and from the amp, because of the nature of the amp itself. This unit isn't Class A. The gain is stepping upwards as you increase that volume knob. Some amps, like the Zale HM1 or the WA5LE, provide full power all the time. The volume knob is just a potentiometer. Think of it like a water spigot. The pressure is all there. You're just adjusting how much of that water or power is leaking through to your headphones. Now, with this amp, the volume pod is actually increasing the gain as you increase the volume. It's sort of like increasing the power to a pump behind the water spigot. And as you open it up, you're actually shoving more pressure through the spigot. Now, this process creates something called a DC offset, and you get the clicks. It's the same scheme they used on the amp's older brother, the Bakoon 13R. The clicks aren't damaging or anything to your headphones. It's just a touch annoying. Now, to Enleum's credit, they cleaned up the volume indicators on the 23R. The original had so many steps it could be downright confusing. They marked every 10 units on one set of LEDs and then the granular adjustments on a second row of LEDs. Here, it's simplified. A white marker clearly indicates the volume position. Very clever. And that volume knob takes a little more effort. The Bakoon kind of flies around. This one's got a little more resistance to it. Then there's the high power, low power issue. Now, V1 is low power, V2 is high power, but you can only set it when it's blinking. How do you get it to blink? Well, you hold down this top right button on the snazzy remote. It's a heavy chunk of metal, pretty good remote, but it's also pretty much unlabeled. Then you use these arrow keys to bounce between low and high power. I didn't think it was possible to make an even more confusing control setup for low versus high power than the original Bakoon 13R, which is controlled with the amp off and a long press on the volume knob. But Enleum has indeed found a way to amplify the confusion along with that input signal. All right, let's talk about the feet. These things are clicky. There are 3 legs on the bottom, and then they give you these separate silicone discs, which I didn't want to risk dirtying because, you know, loner. But you really need these discs because the amp won't hold still on a desktop without them. You try and put a headphone jack into there and it pushes the amp all over your desk. Now, I'm not sure why Enleum didn't just attach those discs permanently. This amp really does need them. And then you got these 2 BNC connectors on the back, presumably for a matching Enleum or Bakoon DAC or something. No product exists to utilize this BNC setup. Why include them? Well, they're on the original Bakoon, so why not?
Help?
Yeah, this is one quirky amp, that's for sure. Let's talk about some power. 25 watts into 8 ohms, and you get access to all of that juice because just like the original Bakoon, the full 25 watts is going straight into the headphone circuit as well as the speaker taps on the back. Now, low power mode will provide you about 7 dB of gain. High power jumps it up to about 22 dB. That's a huge jump, folks, and that jump comes with a few trade-offs. Anytime you push gain, you also push grain. So generally, you want an amp in as low a power setting as possible, But there's something more going on here in actual practice, because the original Bakoon has enough power to drive all of my headphones too. Both of these amps share the same power rating, so shouldn't they sound pretty much identical? Well, on paper you'd think so, but in practice things are quite a bit different. So let's talk about what that difference sounds like. And we're going to be using the Sesfara for this part, and I'm going to be talking about Rhiannon from Fleetwood Mac. Now, the song starts with Lindsay's guitar doubled, and then the bass and drums kick. And on the 13R, the bass hits with a clean low fill. The stage is reasonably wide, and there's some layering. It's nice. It's a good presentation. Then I shift over to the Enleum AMP-23r, same track, and Lindsay's guitars come in, again, nicely. These are mids, this is the Sesfara's wheelhouse, but then the bass kicks, and there's a low sub underneath that brings out some mystery in this track that just isn't there on the Bakoon. It's pure dark emotion. This is a song about a witch, and yeah, darkness really adds to the mood of this track. The song widens out, there are more layers to the sound, the detail, the image, pretty similar between the two amps, but it's the stage and the sound structure, the presence of that deep sub that propels the Enleum experience to the next level on the Sesfara. Plus, and this is harder to describe, there's a force behind the bass, a percussive impact that I've not heard this headphone deliver with other amps. Now, it's adding pure emotion by giving me more down low in the sub with a powerful punch that comes across as slam. I also hear greater clarity, but I think that's kind of the layer separating the sounds more, but it comes across as greater detail, even though it's probably a byproduct of another characteristic. Jumping tracks to Over My Head, that's a bass-driven song. Christine McVie's vocal is one of her best, but John McVie's bass on that song really lays the foundation for what Lindsay and Mick's kick are doing on top of it. It's all the difference with that extra sub-bass presence and thump. Mick's congos are on the extreme width of the stage. They spread this song outward. Yeah, the Sesfara with the Enleum, it's just so special. Next up, I'm going to talk Riders on the Storm from the Doors, 2021 remaster, 192 kilohertz MQA. Don't worry, we're not going there, okay? Now, the 13R started off well enough. The bass on the song isn't really punchy. It's actually almost a pedal tone is what I heard. It's a pretty good remaster, actually. There's an extra yelp or two included from Morrison that was different from the original mix. That was kind of fun to hear. The separation is really what they worked on for this remaster. When I moved over to the Enleum, the bass was actually pretty comparable to the 13R. There was slightly a little more boost down there, but where the difference really lied was in the drum kit. The drums had more impact, particularly the kick drum. There's a slap there that I didn't get on the 13R. Again, the stage opened up more, and I got more of those individual raindrops from the sound effects they added to that song. It's very holographic on the remaster. So, what's going on here? Why is there this difference in the sub and the slam on these two fairly similar amps? Well, we discussed this at length on the live stream, and we found some photos of each of these amps with the covers removed. And what's causing this difference appears to be the capacitance of the 23R. The caps are more numerous and retain more energy. Now, a capacitor is basically a battery. It stores energy until a circuit requests it. A larger capacitor, in theory, releases a greater burst of energy into the circuit, which I believe on the Sesfara pushes the sub-bass into slam. It's an intense, deep punch that thumps you on the back of your head. It's positively the best quality of this Enleum. The more you experience it, the more you want it. And it made me go back and listen to tracks that I've always enjoyed, but in this case, it's presenting a physical effect that gives the bass texture, this physical force that impresses me every time I hear the Enleum paired with the Susvara. Now let's talk about where this amp kind of disappointed me, and that's that this thing doesn't really light up every headphone you put to it. Demanding headphones like the Susvara, the LCD4, the Modhouse Tungsten, they seem to thrive on this amp. But my lesser demanding headphones, the ZMF Caldera, the Meze Elite, it doesn't have that revelatory effect. Music doesn't sound bad on the Caldera Enleum setup, but it doesn't sound special in the way that the Susvara sounds. The sub isn't magically activated the way it is on the LCD4 and the Susvara. I don't get that sense of wonder from the stage and the euphoric sub bass, percussive fill that I get on the Susvara and the LCD4 pairings. It simply sounds good. Very good, in fact. But I don't feel that the Caldera gets anything special out of the Enleum the way it does, say, on the Zale HM1. For example, I switched over to the Grateful Dead and American Beauty, and I did a Caldera test for this, and I moved between the Bakoon and the Enleum. Now, Friend of the Devil was the track, and what I love about this track is the detailed acoustic picking. You've got two separate guitars in each channel, and then running beneath everything is this deep, deep sub with this gorgeous, gorgeous bass line. Now, running it through the 13R, it's a sensation on the Caldera. It's that energetic, lively approach with all the sub and the detail. It really brings this track to life. On the Enleum, the mids sound more recessed. Jerry's vocal doesn't pop as much. His voice has more body on the Bakoon with the Caldera. With the Enleum, the stage goes wider for sure, and there's greater separation, but somehow it comes across less cohesive with the Caldera compared to the Caldera with the 13R. I think both amps did a great job. I just preferred the 13R with the Caldera. Now, the same track on the Susvara, it's the opposite. You get this wider soundstage. You get more impact down low with the 23R. Increased detail, yeah, I'm taking the Enleum here. There was one pairing that didn't work at all on the Enleum. It's the curious case of the Abyss 1266TC. The Bakoon has a smoother overall presentation. The 23R, the mids just sounded nasally to me. There was this honk in the mids that just wasn't very pleasant. And I don't hear it on any of my other headphone amps paired with the Abyss. How can this 23R do such amazing things on the Susvara, yet leave deficits all over the map with the 1266TC? I have no idea. I can only describe what I hear. I thought maybe it was like the gain staging, so I dropped the power into low power mode, and then I upped the output of the DAC and played with the voltage there. I could maybe make it a little bit better, but I just never really got comfortable with the Abyss on the 23R and find that sweet spot. My only working theory is that somehow the Enleum is overdriving the 1266TC. At any rate, I ran out of patience trying to figure it out. I just note that the 1266TC with the Enleum isn't really the way to go, at least to my ears. The Abyss is a sensational headphone, and on the Ferrum stack, the Woo WA5, and the Zale, this thing really excels. Audeze's LCD4. Now, this was another of my favorite pairings with the Enleum. The OG LCD is a little bit slower these days than a lot of my other headphones, but the Enleum pushes those LCD drivers hard, and you get that bass impact. It is pure spectacle, and the image is also a little bit sharper too. Again, the gain staging with the Enleum, you got to go to the lower power to bring the better results. The only area where I felt that the 13R bested the 23 was in the tonality of the mids, which is to say the LCD4 sounds a little more natural with vocals on the Bakoon than with the Enleum. So to this point, the 23R is a dream amp for the Susvara, Tungsten, LCD4, and everything else I kind of paired with it was just very good or less. In other words, the Enleum is outstanding with hard to drive stuff and less so with the other headphones. Not to say it doesn't pair at all with the others, except maybe the Abyss, but I get more magic from other amps with my non-Susvara class headphones. And I believe this may explain why the Enleum got such tremendous initial praise and then the shine wore off in the months after its release. The initial reviews were done mostly with the Susvara, almost across the board. The Enleum 23R presents itself as a purpose-built Susvara killing machine. And as the months wore on and other reviewers got their hands on this amp, they were probably putting it with other headphones and it wasn't giving them the same spectacular results. It's just a theory, but for me, here's the thing, and it's a really big thing. The pairing with the Susvara is so good. I spent weeks late at night listening to my favorite albums all over again for the first time. And it was pure audiophile euphoria around here at the director's garage. Any source, any genre, if the source was halfway decent, I was on the ride and living my best life. Like seriously, one of the best headphone experiences I've ever heard. And I've heard a lot of headphones. Now, I should also mention another part of this equation could be the DAC. I'm driving the Enleum with the DCS Lena DAC. It's a $12,000 piece of ring DAC tech that may be a good part of the synergy I'm finding between the Enleum and the Susvara. The DCS has output staging on the DAC, selectable from 0.2 volts up to 6 volts, so I'm able to keep the input on the amp up so I don't have to push the gain as much, and that keeps the noise and distortion to a minimum. But I really think it's the capacitance that I mentioned earlier that's making such an impact with the Susvara and the other hard-to-drive headphones. All that capacitance may be the reason that some other headphones impress me less. I may be overdriving some of these other headphones and providing a capacitance punch that may light up a hard-to-drive Susvara, but it overwhelms the lesser demanding drivers. It makes sense with some of my other headphones, like the Caldera or the Meze Elite or whatever, but I can't logically reconcile why the Abyss 1266TC is getting so nasally in the mids simply because of a bunch of higher-powered capacitors. There must be something else going on. I just haven't figured it out. So this episode is already insanely long. Why not make it longer? Let's throw the new Zale HM1 into the mix. The biggest difference off the top is that the Zale pairs well with nearly every other headphone. Susvara, Atrium, Abyss, maybe don't care. It even sounds great with my Mod House Tungsten, though it struggles in the gain department to get really loud. The Zale can tweak the sound with spatial effects and EQ shelves. Can't do that with the Enleum. The Enleum, as I mentioned earlier, is a Class AB amp that increases gain as you raise the volume. The Zale runs in Class A. The volume knob is just an attenuator. The amp's putting out full power all the time. The Enleum has no negative feedback circuit, which is an error correction circuit. The Zale can do both negative feedback, or you can bypass it with the flick of a switch. The effects of that feedback circuit are you get a cleaner sound with the feedback engaged, get a little grittier sound with the feedback off. I like having the option. Now, to be fair, the Enleum also costs thousands of dollars cheaper, but we are in rare air here as far as amps are concerned. Now, I found 3 areas where the Enleum takes a serious advantage over the Zale. One is the remote. The Zale is strictly manual input. You got to push all the buttons and turn all the knobs yourself. The Enleum has this snazzy little remote. Given the choice, yeah, remote please. The second is in the amp capabilities. Now, the Enleum can drive outboard speakers. Can't do that with the ZAIL. The third area is in raw power. The Enleum is pushing 25 watts into 8 ohms. The ZAIL is pushing about 2 watts into 8 ohms. And the volume pot will let you know this on the Enleum. Anywhere near 11 o'clock and you're putting the Susvara into the pain threshold. On the ZAIL, you can go way up to 3 o'clock before you get to that pain threshold. And this is with the DCS Lena DAC pushing 6 volts, where I got to that impressive Enleum result with just 2 volt output from the Lena DAC. What does all this mean in practical terms? Well, how does the Enleum compare to the sound of the ZAIL? And to my ears, the ZAIL has a cleaner signal path across the board. It sounds quieter, it images better, the soundstage is wider, and the detail, well, the ZAIL completely out-details the Enleum on the Susvara. Listening to the ZAIL reminded me of the audition I did with the DCS Lena amp. The transient details, little triangles, these subtle things are clearer and they ring out better on the ZAIL. But we also have to talk about that power situation. The Enleum, for lack of a better term, has balls. It gives more heft to the Susvara in the bass. There's more of an impact that the Enleum gives to the Susvara that no other amp I've tested achieves. It's this raw, visceral bass impact. The ZAIL gives the Susvara excellent presence in the sub. The Enleum also brings that presence, but it gives it with some weight behind the sound. It's like a lurking source of emotion that really engages me. It's so good that I listed the Bakoon after hearing it. It's that good. But in all these other categories, yeah, I prefer the ZAIL. On my non-Susvara and tungsten headphones, I prefer the ZAIL across the board. And the ZAIL is one of the very best Caldera pairings I've heard. Transients, bass impact, all of it, fabulous on the ZAIL, whereas on the Enleum, it's just good. Certainly not bad, but not great either. So let's finally start getting to some conclusions here. Is the Enleum AMP-23r endgame? Well, for the Susvara and the tungsten, it's an unequivocal yes. It's one of the best Susvara pairings I've heard, if not the best. It's also top tier with the Audeze LCD4. It was good with the Caldera and the Meze Elite, but I've certainly heard better, and I didn't care for the Enleum at all with my Abyss 1266 TC at any power setting. Is the Enleum worth the money? Well, if you're one of the many unsatisfied Susvara owners, yeah, absolutely. This is a must audition. If you want the Susvara to have a thumpy sub with impact, yeah, the Enleum is the best I've heard at that one characteristic. And don't sell this short. It's really engaging. The more you experience it, the more you want it. It's like really good drugs. Hey! Okay? But if you use generally easier to drive headphones, or you have a variety of headphones, the Enleum can be a bit fussy. You're changing headphones out, you're having to restage your gain for the headphone, changing input, output settings to get the most out of whatever headphone you're using. If you're not using the Susvara or the tungsten, I would look to something like the Ferrum or STAX, because on easier to drive headphones, I get the same or better results for a lot less money. All these amps, by the way, can be picked up at Audio 46, and I gotta send them some love for sending this beast my way. And maybe curse them too, because I do want one. I just can't afford it at this time. Now, still ahead is my ZAIL HM1 review and a full review of that headphone from Modhouse, plus another amp and a surprise purchase. I did it again. we have so much to get to, so make sure you subscribe to the Director's Garage. Why would you want to miss out on any of this? And check out the Patreon link if you're into it. Give this episode a thumbs up if you liked my review of the Enleum 23R, or you can do the other thing if you've simply had enough, and who hasn't? This was an insanely long review for sure. Anyway, I can't say I blame you either way, and I will see you guys before you know it.